The DNA test on the human was for paternity, until it revealed Imperial Bloodline, Last Heir. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. Far beyond the reaches of Sol system, in the metal innards of a laboratory on the station Helios 7, a human male sat uncomfortably in a chair designed for a body with a different skeletal structure. The harsh blue light reflected off both the silver instruments and the anxiety in his eyes. Ethan Cole wiped his sweaty palms against his worn maintenance jumpsuit. 15 years of working menial jobs across the galaxy had taught him many things. How to fix a hyperdrive with makeshift parts, how to placate angry administrators of a dozen species, and how to stay invisible when necessary. But nothing had prepared him for this moment, sitting in an alien medical facility, waiting for a paternity test. "Mr. Cole," the Viridian doctor said, gliding into the room with unsettling grace, 6 elongated fingers delicately holding a tablet. "The preliminary genetic sampling is complete. We can proceed to the next phase." Dr. Saren towered over Ethan by at least a foot, her blue-green skin shimmering under the laboratory lights. Her species' reputation for precision and discretion was why Kayla, Ethan's ex-partner, had chosen this facility. "I still don't understand why I needed to come all this way," Ethan said, his voice tight. "Blood tests for paternity haven't changed in centuries. Why couldn't this be done on Proxima Colony where I work?" Dr. Saren's large eyes, solid black with no visible pupils, regarded him with what might have been pity. "Ms. Harper insisted on our facility's thoroughness. Hybrid children require special considerations." Ethan's jaw clenched. 8 months ago, he'd ended his 2-year relationship with Kayla Harper, a fellow human who worked as a xenocultural liaison between Earth's diplomatic corps and various alien governments. The breakup had been surprisingly amicable, right until the moment she contacted him last week claiming she was pregnant with his child. A child that, according to her, showed signs of not being entirely human. "That's impossible," Ethan said, repeating the same argument he'd been making for days. "We're both human. How could our child be a hybrid?" "That is what we're here to determine," the doctor replied evenly. "Please extend your arm." Ethan complied, watching as the doctor positioned a gleaming device over his forearm. There was a quick flash of light and a mild burning sensation. "There. Complete genetic mapping initiated," Dr. Saren announced, studying the tablet as data began to flow across its surface. "You may be interested to know that our process doesn't simply confirm parentage. Our techniques were developed for the Galactic Census Initiative, cataloging the genetic heritage of all sentient species in the Orion Cooperative. It's quite thorough. Ancestral patterns dating back thousands of generations can be detected." "Fascinating," Ethan muttered, not bothering to hide his sarcasm. He just wanted this over with. Kayla had refused to speak with him directly, communicating only through her lawyer. If this child wasn't his, and he was nearly certain it wasn't, he wanted proof immediately. Dr. Saren's attention suddenly focused intently on the tablet. Her long fingers tapped rapidly across the surface, her posture stiffening. "Is something wrong?" Ethan asked, sitting up straighter. "No, not wrong. Unexpected." The doctor's voice had changed, becoming more formal. "Excuse me for a moment." Before Ethan could protest, the doctor had glided out of the room, the door sealing behind her with a pneumatic hiss. Alone in the sterile room, Ethan's anxiety multiplied. He'd known this whole situation felt off. Kayla's sudden claim of pregnancy, her refusal to meet face-to-face, the insistence on this specific facility. Something wasn't adding up. Ethan stood, stretching his legs while eyeing the sealed door. His maintenance background had taught him that most systems had back doors, both literal and figurative. Just as he was considering examining the door's control panel, it slid open again. Dr. Saren wasn't alone this time. Behind her stood 2 tall figures in uniform, the distinctive pearl white and gold of the Viridian Security Force. Their elongated faces were expressionless, but their posture radiated authority. "Mr. Cole," Dr. Saren said, her voice now carrying a formality that hadn't been present before. I need to ask you some questions about your family history. Ethan's eyes flicked between the doctor and the security officers. My family. What does that have to do with paternity testing? Please, sit down. Dr. Saren gestured to the chair. It wasn't a request. Reluctantly, Ethan sat. The security officers positioned themselves on either side of the door. Mr. Cole, what do you know about your great-grandparents? The question caught Ethan off guard. My great-grandparents? Not much. My father's parents died before I was born, and I never knew much about their parents. My mother rarely spoke about her side of the family. What? Instead of answering, Dr. Saren continued. Were you aware of any non-terrestrial origins in your lineage? Non-terrestrial. Ethan laughed, but it came out hollow. I'm human, born on Earth. So were my parents, as far as I know. As far as you know, the doctor repeated, those black eyes studying him with uncomfortable intensity. Mr. Cole, are you familiar with the Zolanthian Empire? Ethan's brow furrowed. Vaguely. Ancient civilization ruled most of the Sagittarius Arm about 5,000 years ago. Disappeared mysteriously. Basic galactic history stuff. Indeed. The Zolanthian Empire ruled over 800 star systems for nearly 10,000 years before their abrupt disappearance. Many theories exist. War, disease, transcendence to another plane of existence. The truth remained unknown, until now. A cold feeling settled in Ethan's stomach. What does this have to do with me? Dr. Saren tapped her tablet, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the room. Complex genetic sequences spiraled in the air between them, sections highlighted in pulsating red. Our genetic archival database contains samples from all known sentient species, including historical records of extinct civilizations. The Zolanthian genetic profile is quite distinctive, most notably their triple helix DNA structure in specific chromosome regions. She pointed to one of the highlighted sections. This is the genetic marker for Zolanthian royal lineage. The doctor swiped across her tablet, and a new genetic sequence appeared alongside the first. This is your DNA, Mr. Cole. Ethan stared at the floating strands. Even with his limited scientific knowledge, he could see the matching sections, glowing with undeniable similarity. That's impossible, he whispered. The evidence suggests otherwise, Dr. Saren replied. Your genetic profile contains markers exclusive to the Zolanthian Imperial Bloodline. Not merely Zolanthian, but Royal Zolanthian. To be specific, you appear to be a direct descendant of Emperor Talix IV, the last known ruler before their civilization's disappearance. Ethan felt dizzy. There must be a mistake. We've run the comparison 17 times, Dr. Saren said. The genetic markers are unmistakable. You, Ethan Cole, carry the Imperial Bloodline of the Zolanthian Empire. Based on the genetic drift patterns, we estimate you are approximately 52 generations removed from Emperor Talix himself. So what? Some alien emperor is my great-great-whatever grandfather. That doesn't mean anything now. Their civilization is gone. One of the security officers stepped forward. Not gone, Mr. Cole. Hidden. The officer reached up and tapped a communication device on his wrist. Central Command. This is Commander Varek. Asset secured. Bloodline confirmation positive. Awaiting extraction. Ethan stood abruptly. Extraction? What the hell is going on? Commander Varek regarded Ethan with newfound deference. My apologies, Heir. Security protocols require discretion until confirmation was absolute. Your safety is our primary concern. My safety? From what? Before anyone could answer, the facility's alarm system activated, shrieking warnings as red emergency lights began to pulse throughout the room. Perimeter breach, announced an automated voice. Multiple hostiles detected. Security lockdown initiated. Commander Varek drew a sleek weapon from his holster. They found us faster than anticipated. Doctor, initiate emergency protocol Salix 7. Dr. Saren was already moving, her fingers flying across her tablet. Initiating now. Air protection sequence engaged. Would someone please tell me what's happening? Ethan demanded, his voice nearly drowned out by the blaring alarms. Your heritage is not as unknown as we had hoped, Commander Varek explained tersely, moving to the door and checking the corridor beyond. The Zalanthian Empire didn't vanish. They went into hiding, scattered across the galaxy, integrating into various civilizations. They were fleeing from something that has never stopped hunting them. The security officer turned to face Ethan directly. For 5 millennia, the survivors of the royal line have been systematically eliminated. You are the last direct descendant of Emperor Talix, the last heir to the Zalanthian throne. And now, those who destroyed the Empire have found you. A thunderous explosion rocked the facility, causing the lights to flicker. Distant sounds of energy weapons and shouting echoed down the corridor. "We need to move now," Commander Varek ordered. "The safe room is 3 levels down. I'm not going anywhere until you explain what's happening." Ethan planted his feet firmly. Dr. Saren approached him, her usual clinical detachment replaced by urgent concern. "Mr. Cole, Heir, there's no time. The hunters will kill everyone in this facility to get to you. They've done it before, countless times across millennia. Please, you must come with us." Ethan hesitated, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. The alarms, the weapons fire, this wasn't some elaborate hoax. What about Kayla? Was she even really pregnant? "Ms. Harper is an agent of the Zalanthian Preservation Society," the doctor explained quickly. "She was assigned to locate potential heirs. The pregnancy claim was a necessary deception to get you here for testing. I apologize for the subterfuge, but standard approaches would have put you at risk." Another explosion, closer this time, made the decision for Ethan. "Fine. Lead the way." Commander Varek nodded to his colleague. "Officer Tren, take point. I'll guard our rear." The small group moved swiftly into the corridor, Ethan finding himself in the center of their protective formation. The hallway was bathed in emergency red lighting, making the white walls appear blood-soaked. "This way," Officer Tren directed, leading them toward a service elevator at the end of the corridor. They had almost reached it when a figure stepped out from an intersecting hallway. Humanoid, but wrong somehow, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural purple luminescence. "Hunter!" shouted Commander Varek, raising his weapon. Before he could fire, the creature moved with impossible speed. One moment it stood 20 feet away. The next, it was directly in front of Officer Tren, a blade-like appendage extending from its arm and plunging through the officer's chest. Tren crumpled to the floor without a sound as the creature turned its attention to Ethan. Its face split into a grotesque approximation of a smile, revealing teeth like polished obsidian. "Last heir," it hissed, its voice sounding like multiple voices speaking in disharmonious unison. "End the line." Commander Varek fired his weapon, the energy blast catching the creature in its shoulder. It shrieked, a sound that seemed to bypass Ethan's ears and reverberate directly in his brain, but didn't fall. "Run!" Varek shouted, continuing to fire as he backed up. "Get to the elevator." Dr. Saren grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward the elevator doors. Behind them, Commander Varek engaged in combat with the hunter, his weapon firing in rapid succession as the creature advanced relentlessly toward him. They reached the elevator, Dr. Saren frantically pressing her palm against the scanner. The doors slid open with agonizing slowness. "Get in," she urged, pushing Ethan inside. As Ethan stumbled into the elevator, he looked back to see Commander Varek being lifted off his feet by the hunter, those obsidian teeth inches from the commander's throat. "Close the doors," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can't leave him," Dr. Saren protested, even as she moved into the elevator beside Ethan. "He's already dead," Ethan replied, the cold certainty in his voice surprising even himself. As if to confirm his words, the hunter's blade arm swung in a vicious arc, and Commander Varek's body fell to the floor in 2 separate pieces. Dr. Saren made a strangled sound of horror as she slapped the emergency close button. The doors began to slide shut just as the hunter turned its attention back to them, those luminous purple eyes locking onto Ethan with malevolent recognition. The doors sealed with a soft chime, and the elevator began its descent. What was that thing? Ethan asked, his voice shaking despite his efforts to control it. "Avoid Hunter," Dr. Saren replied, her own voice unsteady. "They're what remains of the creatures that destroyed the Zalanthian Empire. Not quite alive, not quite machine, something else entirely. And it's hunting me because of my bloodline. Yes, the hunters seek to eradicate all traces of Zalanthian royal DNA from the galaxy. No one knows why, only that they've pursued this goal with single-minded determination for 5,000 years." The elevator continued its descent, the soft hum of its mechanisms eerily normal compared to the chaos they'd just witnessed. "How many are there?" Ethan asked. "Unknown. The records suggest they're few in number, but virtually immortal. That one may have killed hundreds of your ancestors over the millennia." Ethan felt a cold anger building inside him, displacing the fear. "And where exactly are we going?" "To the sublevels. There's a secure vault with a direct connection to a hidden transit system. It will take us to the Preservation Society's headquarters." "And then what?" Dr. Saren's large eyes regarded him solemnly. "Then you learn who you really are, Heir, and why your existence might change everything." The elevator slowed, approaching its destination. Dr. Saren straightened her posture, gathering her composure. "Stay close to me. The security systems below should keep us safe, but we must move quickly." The doors slid open to reveal a stark corridor different from the ones above, darker, older somehow, with walls of a material that resembled stone more than metal. Symbols that Ethan didn't recognize were carved into the surfaces, glowing with a faint blue luminescence. "Zalanthian script," Dr. Saren explained, noticing his attention. "This facility was built on the ruins of an ancient outpost. The symbols are protection wards. They disrupt the hunter's perception." They moved quickly down the corridor, the glowing symbols seeming to brighten as they passed. Despite the situation, Ethan found himself oddly drawn to the markings, as if they resonated with something deep within him. "Here," Dr. Saren said, stopping at what appeared to be a solid wall. She pressed her palm against a specific section, and the wall shimmered before dissolving away, revealing a chamber beyond. Inside was a circular room dominated by a platform in its center. The platform was surrounded by what looked like elongated crystal shards, each taller than a person, arranged in a precise pattern. "A molecular transit array," Dr. Saren explained, guiding Ethan toward the platform. "It will disassemble our molecular structure and reassemble us at the destination." "That sounds unpleasant," Ethan remarked, eyeing the device warily. "It's perfectly safe. The Zalanthians perfected this technology at the height of their empire." As they stepped onto the platform, the crystal shards began to hum, their surfaces shimmering with energy. "There's one thing I don't understand," Ethan said, as Dr. Saren began activating the array's controls. "If the Zalanthian Empire was so advanced, how were they defeated? What could have possibly—" A thunderous crash interrupted him as the entrance to the chamber exploded inward. Through the cloud of debris, the hunter emerged, its shape seeming to flicker and distort as it passed through the doorway. "The wards," Dr. Saren gasped. "They should have prevented. They've evolved," the hunter hissed, its voice causing the crystal shards to vibrate discordantly. "Adapted. Learned. As we always do." Dr. Saren frantically worked the controls, the crystal shards glowing brighter. "Just a few more seconds," she whispered to Ethan. The hunter advanced, its movements jerky yet terrifyingly fast. "No escape, last Heir. The line ends. The prophecy dies." "Prophecy?" Ethan questioned, backing up against the control console. "What prophecy?" The hunter's face contorted into that horrific smile again. "The return. The awakening. We prevent. We destroy. We ensure silence remains." A high-pitched whine began to emanate from the crystal shards, their glow intensifying to nearly blinding levels. "Now!" Dr. Saren shouted, slapping a final control. The hunter lunged forward with supernatural speed, its blade arm extended toward Ethan's heart. In that frozen moment, Ethan saw Dr. Saren throw herself into the hunter's path, the blade piercing through her chest instead of his. "Run, Heir," she gasped, blue-green blood bubbling from her mouth. Find the Preservation Society. Find Kayla. Remember the prophecy of return. The crystal array reached its crescendo, light enveloping Ethan's vision. The last thing he saw was Dr. Saren collapsing as the hunter wrenched its blade free, those purple eyes still fixed on him with inhuman hatred. Then, reality dissolved around him, his consciousness stretching across space as the molecular transit initiated. His last thought before blackness claimed him was a silent promise to the doctor who had sacrificed herself. He would find answers, and somehow, he would survive. When Ethan's consciousness returned, his body felt wrong, tingling and numb, as if each cell was relearning its purpose. He gasped, drawing air into lungs that remembered their function only after the first desperate inhalation. Blinking against harsh light, he found himself on his knees on another transit platform, this one surrounded not by crystal shards, but by armed guards pointing weapons at him. Their uniforms were unfamiliar, midnight blue with silver trim, faces obscured by reflective helmets. Identity confirmed, announced a synthesized voice. Zalanthian genetic markers verified. Imperial lineage authenticated. Welcome, Heir. The guards lowered their weapons in perfect synchronization, then knelt on one knee, heads bowed. What? Ethan struggled to his feet, his body still adjusting to reassembly. Where am I? Safe harbor, answered one of the guards, rising and removing his helmet to reveal a face with distinctly non-human features, skin with a subtle metallic sheen, eyes with horizontal pupils. Preservation Society Headquarters, Hidden Moon of Centauri Prime. I am Security Chief Tavros. Dr. Saren. Ethan said, the memory of her sacrifice suddenly vivid. We know, Tavros replied, his expression solemn. The transit system recorded her life signs terminating at the moment of your departure. She died with honor, protecting the bloodline as she was sworn to do. Ethan felt anger rising. I'm tired of people dying for my bloodline. I never asked for this. I don't want any part of it. Nevertheless, it is who you are, came a familiar voice from behind the guards. The security personnel parted to reveal Kayla Harper, dressed in the same midnight blue uniform but with gold accents that suggested higher rank. Her red hair was pulled back severely, her expression professionally neutral, but Ethan could see tension in the set of her shoulders. Kayla, Ethan said, her name somewhere between a greeting and an accusation. Commander Harper, she corrected, stepping onto the platform. And before you say anything else, yes, I lied to you. About many things. But not everything, Ethan. Like what? Our relationship? Was that real? Or just another way to get close to my precious DNA? She didn't flinch at his bitter tone. My assignment was to monitor you, yes. The relationship wasn't planned. It was a complication. A complication, Ethan repeated flatly. We can discuss personal matters later, Kayla said, her professional mask firmly back in place. Right now, you need to be briefed. The Void Hunters will have already dispatched additional units to track you. We have limited time. Ethan wanted to argue, to demand answers about their relationship, but the memory of the Hunters' relentless pursuit pushed personal concerns aside. Fine. Brief me. Kayla nodded to Chief Tavros, who gestured toward an exit. This way, Heir. Ethan followed, noting that Kayla kept pace beside him, while the guards formed a protective perimeter around them. They moved through corridors of the same strange stone-like material he'd seen in the sublevel of the medical facility, though here the Zalanthian symbols were more abundant, covering nearly every surface. The Preservation Society has existed for 5 millennia, Kayla explained as they walked. Founded by survivors of the Empire's fall, its mission is twofold: to protect remaining Zalanthian descendants and to prepare for the prophesied return. The hunter mentioned a prophecy too, Ethan said. What exactly does it say? Kayla's steps faltered almost imperceptibly. It's complex. The full text has been lost to time, but the core remains. When the last heir stands at the nexus of worlds, the sleeping empire shall awaken, and the void shall tremble. That's cryptic. Prophecies usually are. She replied with the hint of a smile that reminded Ethan painfully of their time together. But we believe it refers to you, the last direct descendant of Emperor Talix, and your potential to restore what was lost. Restore an empire that's been gone for 5,000 years? That's insane. They reached the end of the corridor, where massive doors carved with intricate symbols slowly parted at their approach. Beyond lay a circular chamber, its domed ceiling a perfect representation of the night sky, stars glittering with unnatural brightness against the deep black. In the center of the chamber stood a group of figures, a diverse collection of species, some familiar to Ethan, others entirely alien. All wore variations of the midnight blue uniform, though each was customized to accommodate their different physiologies. The Council of Preservation, Kayla announced, leading Ethan forward. The leaders of our society, representatives of the worlds that once formed the heart of the Zalanthian Empire. The assembled figures turned as one to observe Ethan's approach, their collective gaze making him intensely aware of his disheveled appearance and maintenance jumpsuit, hardly the image of imperial heritage. One figure stepped forward, humanoid but clearly not human, with skin that shifted colors subtly like oil on water, and eyes that contained swirling galaxies within them. "I am First Counselor Alara," she said, her voice melodious, yet carrying an undercurrent of immense age. "For 300 years, I have led the Preservation Society, waiting for this moment, the finding of the last heir." Ethan felt overwhelmed by the weight of expectation in her voice. "Look, I'm just a maintenance worker from Earth. I fix things that break. I'm not an emperor or a savior or whatever it is you're hoping for." First Counselor Alara smiled, the expression transforming her alien features into something strangely compassionate. "You are precisely what we hoped for, Ethan Cole. Someone untouched by expectation, unshaped by the burden of knowledge. The prophecy speaks not of a trained ruler, but of one who carries the blood yet knows not its power. And what exactly is this power? Because so far, all it's gotten me is chased by nightmare creatures and responsible for deaths." The counselor's expression sobered. "The Void Hunters are relentless, yes. They have pursued your bloodline across millennia because they fear what you represent, the possibility of awakening." "Awakening what?" Instead of answering directly, Alara turned and gestured to the star-filled dome above them. "What do you see, Ethan Cole?" Ethan looked up, bewildered by the seemingly irrelevant question. "Stars. A map of the galaxy, I guess." "Not quite," Kayla said quietly beside him. "This is a real-time observation. Those are actual stars you're seeing, not a representation." "Impossible," Ethan replied automatically. "No observation system could." "Not an observation system," Alara interrupted. "A connection. The Zalanthians did not build their empire with weapons or conquest, but with something far more powerful, harmony. They discovered the fundamental truth that all matter, all energy in the universe is connected. They learned to access that connection, to manipulate it, to use it to link worlds across vast distances." She gestured, and the star field above them shifted, zooming in to focus on a particular region. 5,000 years ago, the Empire spanned this entire sector. Hundreds of worlds, billions of lives, all living in unprecedented prosperity and peace. Until they came. The view changed again, and Ethan saw darkness spreading across the star field, not the natural darkness of space, but something wrong, something that seemed to devour the light of the stars it touched. "The void," Alara continued, her voice heavy with ancient sorrow. "We don't know what they truly are or where they came from. Some believe they're from outside our universe entirely, entities that exist in the spaces between realities. What we do know is that they feed on connection, the very foundation of Zalanthian power." "So these hunters," Ethan said slowly, "they're what? Scouts? Soldiers? Fragments?" Another counselor spoke up, this one a being composed of what appeared to be crystalline structures. "Pieces of the greater void, given form to hunt in our reality. Each is connected to the whole, sharing a singular purpose, to prevent the Empire's return." "Because if the Empire returns," Kayla added, It threatens their ability to feed on the connections between worlds. Ethan shook his head, struggling to absorb the scale of what they were describing. And you think I can somehow stop this? One human against cosmic horror entities. Not human, Elara corrected gently. Not entirely. The Zalanthian royal line carried something unique, the ability to perceive and manipulate the connections at their most fundamental level. It's in your blood, dormant but present. The genetic tests confirmed it. So what now? Ethan asked, fatigue suddenly washing over him as the adrenaline of the past few hours began to fade. You train me to use these supposed abilities? Turn me into your weapon against the void. No, Elara replied, her voice firm. We protect you while you choose your own path. The prophecy speaks of choice, not coercion. The last heir stands at the nexus of worlds, stands, not is forced. Before Ethan could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the chamber. The starfield above them rippled, sections of it darkening ominously. Void activity detected, announced an automated voice. Multiple incursions in sectors 7 through 12. Defensive protocols engaged. Chief Tavros stepped forward, hand already on his weapon. They found us faster than anticipated. We need to move the heir to the inner sanctum immediately. Elara nodded gravely. Proceed. I will join the defensive teams. As the council members dispersed with urgent efficiency, Kayla gripped Ethan's arm. Come with me. Quickly. Where are we going? Ethan asked, allowing her to guide him toward a small, inconspicuous door at the far side of the chamber. To the heart of the society's sanctuary, she replied, her voice tight with controlled fear. The one place the void cannot reach, the Nexus Chamber. As they hurried through the door and down a narrow spiral staircase, the distant sounds of combat began to echo through the facility. Energy weapons, shouted commands, and underneath it all, that mind-piercing shriek that Ethan recognized from the Void Hunter. They're inside already, he said, the realization chilling his blood. Kayla's grip on his arm tightened. The outer defenses must have failed. We need to hurry. They descended deeper, the staircase seemingly endless. The walls here were different. Not the stone-like material of the upper levels, but something that appeared almost liquid, shifting colors and patterns as they passed. Living crystal, Kayla explained, noticing his fascination despite their haste. The last remaining sample from the heart of the Zalanthian throne world. It responds to the royal bloodline. As if to confirm her words, the walls pulsed with increased luminosity as Ethan passed, trails of light following his movements like ripples in water. Finally, they reached the bottom of the staircase, emerging into a small antechamber. At its center stood a circular door unlike anything Ethan had seen before, not metal or stone, but what appeared to be solid light, swirling in complex patterns. The Nexus Chamber, Kayla said, releasing his arm and moving to a control panel beside the door. Only those with Zalanthian blood can enter. Even I cannot follow you inside. You expect me to go in alone? Ethan asked incredulously. After everything that's happened? Kayla paused in her work at the panel, turning to face him fully. For the first time since their reunion, her professional mask slipped, revealing the woman he had known, and, despite everything, still cared for. I'm sorry, Ethan, for the deception, for dragging you into this war you never asked to join, but not for finding you. Her eyes held his, sincere and unwavering. The galaxy needs you. I need you to trust me one more time. Above them, the sounds of battle grew louder. The ceiling trembled, dust and small fragments raining down as something massive impacted the levels above. Ethan looked at the swirling door, then back at Kayla. What's in there? The answer to who you are, she replied. And maybe, just maybe, the salvation of us all. Another impact shook the chamber more violently. The staircase behind them partially collapsed, stone and crystal shattering. We're out of time, Kayla said urgently, finishing her work at the panel. The door of light began to pulse faster, its swirling patterns aligning into what looked like a pathway. You need to go now? Ethan hesitated. Come with me. Kayla shook her head, already drawing her weapon. I can't. The chamber won't admit me. Besides, she gave him a sad smile. Someone needs to make sure you have time. Before Ethan could protest further, the antechamber door burst open. Through it came not the humanoid hunter from before, but something far worse, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to consume the very air around it, purple eyes opening and closing across its amorphous surface. "Go!" Kayla shouted, firing her weapon at the monstrosity. The energy blasts seemed to be absorbed into the darkness, causing momentary ripples but no apparent damage. The mass surged forward with terrifying speed. Kayla stood her ground, continuing to fire as she positioned herself between the creature and Ethan. "Kayla!" Ethan cried out, reaching for her. She turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting his one last time. "Find your destiny, Ethan, and know that what was between us, that was real." Then she charged directly at the darkness, her weapon overloading with a high-pitched whine. As the void mass engulfed her, Ethan saw her slam her hand down on her weapon's core. The resulting explosion threw him backward through the doorway of light. The last thing he saw before the Nexus chamber sealed was a sphere of blinding energy momentarily pushing back the darkness, Kayla's silhouette at its center, consumed by her own sacrifice. Then the door closed, and Ethan Cole, last heir to the Zalanthian throne, was alone in the heart of a sanctuary built to await his coming, the weight of an entire galaxy's fate suddenly resting on his shoulders. Inside the Nexus chamber, time seemed to hold no meaning. The space was both vast and intimate, its boundaries impossible to determine. Light emanated not from any visible source, but from the air itself, creating an environment of perfect illumination without shadows. At the center of the chamber stood a simple pedestal of the same living crystal he had seen in the stairwell. Upon it rested a small object, a cube, no larger than his palm, that seemed to be made of the same material as the pedestal, yet somehow more refined, more perfect in its construction. Ethan approached cautiously, keenly aware of the silence pressing in around him. The events of the past hours replayed in his mind, the paternity test that wasn't, the revelation of his heritage, the horrific void hunters, and the sacrifices of Dr. Saren and Kayla. So many deaths, all because of blood he never knew he carried. As he neared the pedestal, the cube began to glow, responding to his presence. Ripples of light cascaded across its surface, forming patterns similar to the Zalanthian script he had seen throughout the facility. Something about those patterns resonated within him, as if part of his mind recognized a language he had never studied. "What am I supposed to do?" he asked aloud, his voice sounding strangely flat in the dimensionless chamber. To his surprise, the cube responded, the patterns shifting to form new configurations before a gentle voice emanated from it. Not sound exactly, but something that translated directly into understanding in his mind. "You are here." At last, the bloodline returns to the Nexus. Ethan nearly stepped back in shock. "You can speak." "I am not speaking as you understand it," came the response. "I am connecting. Your Zalanthian genetics allow you to perceive these connections as communication. I am the archive, repository of all that remains of the Empire's knowledge." "The cube is some kind of database?" Ethan asked, trying to make sense of the situation. "I am more than data. I am memory, experience, wisdom. I contain the collective consciousness of the Zalanthian Council of Elders at the moment of the Empire's fall." The patterns on the cube shifted again, becoming more complex. "You have questions?" "This is right. To understand your destiny, you must first understand your past." Ethan hesitated only briefly before asking the question that burned most fiercely. "What happened to the Empire? How did it fall?" The cube's glow intensified, and suddenly the chamber around Ethan changed. The featureless space transformed, becoming a vast council chamber. Transparent walls revealed a breathtaking vista of a city unlike any Ethan had ever seen. Crystal spires reaching impossibly high into a lavender sky, with vehicles of light moving between them in elegant patterns. Around him stood figures, Zalanthians, he presumed, with features that seemed almost human yet distinctly alien. their skin having the same subtle metallic sheen he had noticed on Chief Tavros. The final days of Xelanthus, the throne world, explained the archive's voice. What you see is the memory of the High Council's last gathering, 52 generations before your birth. The figures began to move, to speak, though Ethan heard their voices as direct impressions rather than sound. The void consumes another sector. One of them was saying, desperation evident in his projected thoughts. The outer colonies are lost. Our connection networks cannot withstand their assault. The harmony lattice is failing, another added. World after world falls silent as the connection is severed. At the head of the council sat a figure more imposing than the rest, taller, with eyes that shimmered with inner light and skin that seemed to contain galaxies within its patterns. Upon his brow rested a simple circlet of living crystal. Emperor Talix, the archive's voice explained. Your ancestor. The emperor rose, and the council fell silent. The evacuation proceeds as planned. Talix spoke, his mental voice carrying authority and sorrow in equal measure. Our people scatter to the stars, integrating into 100 different civilizations. The knowledge of what we were, of the connections that bound us, is preserved in the archives and in our blood. And the prophecy, my emperor? Asked an elderly counselor. Are we certain? Talix's expression grew solemn. The seers are unanimous. The void cannot be defeated now, in this time. But a day will come when the last of my line stands at the nexus of worlds, and the choice will be offered. Restoration or eternal darkness. The scene shifted, dissolving into chaos. The beautiful city now under attack, the crystal spires shattering as masses of writhing darkness descended from the sky. Screams filled Ethan's mind, the psychic impression of terror and death overwhelming. Stop! Ethan gasped, falling to his knees. The vision immediately faded, returning the Nexus chamber to its original state, the cube glowing steadily on its pedestal. Forgive me. The archive's voice came more gently. The memories of the fall are intense. Even after 5 millennia, the pain remains fresh within the collective consciousness. Ethan struggled to his feet, still shaken by what he'd witnessed. The Emperor spoke of a choice. What choice? The choice that only you can make, the archive replied. The Empire was not destroyed completely, Ethan Cole. It was hidden, preserved. What do you mean, preserved? Everyone I've met has talked about the Empire in the past tense. Because to them, it exists only in history. But the truth is more complex. The cube's patterns shifted again, forming a representation of the galaxy with certain points illuminated. When the void first appeared, Emperor Talix recognized that direct confrontation was impossible. The void entities fed on the very connections that gave our civilization its power, turning our greatest strength against us. So he evacuated the Empire, Ethan said, remembering the scene he had just witnessed. That was only part of the plan, the archive corrected. While our people scattered, taking new identities among the younger races of the galaxy, Talix enacted a desperate measure. Using the full power of the Imperial throne and the combined consciousness of the High Council, he shifted the core worlds of the Empire, trillions of souls, into a state of temporal stasis, hidden between the moments of normal space-time. Ethan struggled to comprehend the scale of what the archive described. You're saying the Empire still exists? Just paused. Precisely. Not destroyed, merely suspended, waiting for the moment when it could safely return. The Void Hunters sensed this deception, though they could not locate the suspended worlds. Thus began their millennia-long hunt for the royal bloodline, seeking to eliminate the only ones who could reactivate the stasis field and restore the Empire. And that's what the prophecy means, Ethan said slowly. When the last heir stands at the nexus of worlds, the sleeping Empire shall awaken. Yes, this chamber, this nexus, is the control point for the stasis field. From here, with the proper sequence, you could reactivate the connection network and bring the core worlds back into normal space-time. Ethan paced around the pedestal, his mind racing. But wouldn't that just make them vulnerable to the void again? What's changed in 5,000 years? That, The archive responded, is the crux of the prophecy's final line, and the void shall tremble. The nature of that trembling was never clear to the seers, whether it meant victory over the void or merely a temporary advantage. That uncertainty is why the choice must be yours, freely made. What choice exactly? The cube's surface shifted once more, and a complex sequence of patterns appeared, a code or key of some kind. This is the restoration sequence. If activated, it will reverse the temporal stasis, bringing the core worlds of the Empire back into normal space-time, exactly as they were 5 millennia ago. However, it will also immediately alert all void entities to their presence. So I either leave an entire civilization frozen for eternity or potentially condemn them to destruction, Ethan said bitterly. Some choice. There is another option, the archive offered. You could choose to join them in stasis, preserving the bloodline until perhaps some future time when the void no longer threatens the galaxy. Ethan laughed without humor. Hide and hope the problem solves itself? That doesn't sound much better. The choice is not simple, the archive acknowledged. It was not meant to be. The weight of civilizations rests upon it. Before Ethan could respond, the chamber shuddered violently. Cracks appeared in the seemingly impenetrable walls, darkness seeping through like liquid shadow. They breached the nexus. The archive's voice came with newfound urgency. The hunters have evolved beyond our defensive measures. You must decide quickly, Ethan Cole. How? Ethan demanded, panic rising as the darkness spread. I don't know what to do. I'm not an emperor or a savior. I'm a maintenance worker. Perhaps, the archive replied. That is precisely why you were chosen. 5,000 years of guardians trained from birth in imperial traditions failed to find a solution. Perhaps what is needed is not another emperor, but someone who sees connections differently, someone who fixes what is broken. The darkness continued to seep in, tendrils of void matter reaching across the floor toward the pedestal. As they approached, the living crystal began to dim, its light fading wherever the darkness touched it. The nexus weakens, the archive warned. The connection cannot be maintained much longer. Ethan stared at the restoration sequence still displayed on the cube's surface, then at the encroaching darkness. Something the archive had said resonated with him, about connections, about fixing what was broken. As a maintenance worker, he had developed an intuitive understanding of systems, of how components interrelated, of pressure points and vulnerabilities. Wait, he said suddenly, studying the sequence more carefully. This restoration process, it's essentially reactivating a network, right? Re-establishing connections between points in space-time. Yes, the archive confirmed. The stasis field functions by maintaining quantum entanglement between all particles in the core worlds, preserving their exact state outside normal time flow. And the void feeds on these connections, Ethan continued, his mind racing ahead. That's why they were able to devastate the Empire so quickly. They turned its own connection network into a feeding ground. Correct. Then we're thinking about this all wrong. Ethan began pacing faster, the pieces falling into place. What if instead of trying to hide the connections or fight the void directly, we changed the nature of the connections themselves? The archive's response held a note of curiosity. Elaborate. In my work, when a system is compromised, sometimes the solution isn't to shut it down or try to patch the vulnerability. It's to reconfigure it entirely. Ethan gestured toward the restoration sequence. This assumes we're bringing back the Empire exactly as it was, with the same connection structure that was vulnerable to the void. But what if we could modify that structure during restoration? Create a network the void can't feed on. Such a modification would be unprecedented, the archive replied, but Ethan detected a hint of excitement in its mental voice. The restoration sequence was designed to be exact, perfect in its replication. Perfect for a situation 5,000 years ago, Ethan countered. But maybe what we need now is imperfect, adaptable, human. Another violent tremor shook the chamber. The darkness had now covered nearly half the floor, advancing inexorably toward them. Time grows short, the archive warned. What do you propose? Ethan knelt beside the pedestal, studying the cube and its patterns intently. Show me how the sequence works. Not just the activation codes, but the underlying structure. If I'm going to modify it, I need to understand it completely. The cube's surface shifted again, displaying layer upon layer of intricate patterns. The full complexity of the restoration sequence laid bare. To Ethan's surprise, he found he could follow it, almost as if the Xylanthian part of his genetic makeup was translating the alien mathematics into concepts he could grasp. The primary vulnerability, Ethan muttered, tracing a particular pattern, is the synchronicity. All connections re-establish simultaneously, creating a massive energy surge the void can detect and feed upon. He looked up, excitement building. But what if we staggered the restoration? Brought back the worlds in sequence rather than all at once, establishing new connection pathways between them as they reintegrate. A cascading restoration, the archive mused. It would reduce the initial energy signature, potentially confusing the void's feeding instincts. But the sequence would need to be completely redesigned, a task that took the High Council years to perfect. We don't have years, Ethan replied grimly, glancing at the advancing darkness. We have minutes at best. But we do have one advantage they didn't. And that is, I've spent 15 years fixing things on the fly with limited resources and impossible deadlines. Ethan smiled thinly. Improvisation is my specialty. With that, he placed his hands directly on the cube. Immediately, a shock ran through his system, not painful but intensely disorienting, as if his consciousness was suddenly expanded beyond the confines of his body. He found himself immersed in the restoration sequence, perceiving its structure not as abstract mathematics, but as an actual physical network, a lattice of light connecting countless points across space and time. And within that lattice, he could see the weaknesses, the points where the void had originally breached the Empire's defenses. The synchronous activation created a massive flare of connection energy, like a beacon broadcasting across the universe. There, Ethan thought, identifying the primary junction points in the network. If we modify these, create a staged activation sequence. He began to work, manipulating the lattice with his mind, rearranging connection pathways and timing sequences. It was the most complex system he had ever encountered, yet somehow familiar, as if he had been preparing for this task his entire life without knowing it. In the physical world, the darkness crept closer to the pedestal, now mere feet away. The chamber's walls were cracking further, the protective barriers of the nexus failing against the void's relentless assault. The breach widens, the archive warned, its voice seeming distant as Ethan remained immersed in the lattice. You must complete the modifications soon. Almost there, Ethan replied, his consciousness split between the conceptual lattice and the physical danger. The new sequence creates a false pattern, a decoy that should attract the void's attention while the actual restoration happens through secondary pathways. Ingenious, the archive commented. But will it work? Only one way to find out. With a final adjustment, Ethan completed the modified sequence. His consciousness snapped back to his body just as the first tendrils of darkness touched the pedestal's base. The living crystal dimmed further, its light faltering. Now, Ethan Cole, the archive urged. Activate the sequence. Ethan hesitated for just a moment, the weight of his decision pressing upon him. Trillions of lives depended on his improvised solution. If he failed, he might be dooming not just the suspended empire, but potentially the entire galaxy to the void's hunger. Then he thought of Dr. Saren, of Commander Varek, of Kayla, all who had sacrificed themselves believing in the prophecy, believing in him. He would not let their deaths be meaningless. With determined resolve, Ethan pressed his palm against the cube's surface and mentally initiated the modified restoration sequence. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The cube blazed with light so intense it seemed to burn away the darkness touching the pedestal. The chamber filled with a high-pitched harmonic tone as the nexus activated, channeling energy on a scale Ethan could barely comprehend. Through his connection to the cube, Ethan could perceive the process unfolding across the galaxy, the stasis field dissolving in carefully orchestrated stages, world after world reintegrating into normal space-time through pathways designed to confuse and misdirect the Void's attention. And it was working. He sensed the Void Hunters' confusion as they detected restoration energies in multiple locations simultaneously, their single-minded purpose temporarily fragmented by contradictory information. The darkness in the chamber recoiled, pulled in multiple directions as the entities controlling it struggled to determine the true source of the restoration. Then came a backlash Ethan hadn't anticipated. As the first worlds fully reintegrated, the Void entities launched a desperate assault, concentrating their entire collective presence on the Nexus chamber itself. The darkness surged forward with renewed force, engulfing the pedestal entirely despite the cube's brilliant light. They adapt, the archive warned, its voice distorted. They recognized the deception. Ethan felt the darkness touch him, cold beyond imagining, a sensation of absolute emptiness that threatened to devour his very essence. But he maintained his connection to the cube, to the restoration sequence, refusing to let go. Keep going, he gritted through clenched teeth. We're too far in to stop now. The process continued, more worlds reintegrating with each passing moment. Through his expanded awareness, Ethan caught glimpses of these worlds, majestic cities of crystal and light, populations awakening from what to them had been no time at all, unaware that 5 millennia had passed in the galaxy around them. The Void pressed harder, the darkness now crawling up Ethan's arms, numbing and burning simultaneously. He sensed its hatred, its hunger, its singular determination to stop what he had begun. The final stage approaches, the archive announced, its voice growing stronger as more of the Empire returned. The throne world itself prepares to reintegrate. This was the moment of greatest vulnerability. The return of Xanthus, the heart of the Empire, would complete the new connection network. The Void knew this too, focusing all its terrible power directly on Ethan. I can't hold it much longer. Ethan gasped, his consciousness beginning to fragment under the Void's assault. You must, the archive insisted. Only your royal blood can complete the sequence. You are the key, Ethan Cole, the lock and the key both. The darkness had enveloped Ethan completely now, only his connection to the cube keeping him anchored to reality. He could feel himself slipping, the human part of his mind shutting down under the impossible strain. In that moment of near defeat, something unexpected happened. Deep within his genetic makeup, dormant patterns activated, the full expression of his Xanthian heritage, awakened by the extreme duress and proximity to the cube. Suddenly, Ethan could see the Void not as an invincible force but as a pattern itself, complex, alien, but ultimately understandable. And what could be understood could be countered. With newfound clarity, he made one final modification to the restoration sequence, not to hide from the Void, but to confront it directly. As Xanthus began its reintegration, Ethan channeled the full power of the throne world directly through his own consciousness, creating a feedback loop in the very connections the Void sought to feed upon. The effect was catastrophic for the Void. The entity shrieked in Ethan's mind, a sound of rage and pain that transcended physical hearing. The darkness convulsing around him, caught in a trap of its own making. What have you done? The archive asked in wonder. Turned their strength against them. Ethan managed to reply, though speaking took tremendous effort. They feed on connections, so I gave them one they can't handle. The direct connection to the Imperial throne itself, filtered through human consciousness. A connection they've never encountered before. The throne world completed its reintegration, the restored empire now fully present in the galaxy once more. The new connection network stabilized, operating on principles the Void couldn't easily adapt to, a hybrid of Xanthian precision and human improvisation. The darkness around Ethan began to dissipate, retreating from the Nexus chamber as the Void entities withdrew, wounded and confused by the unprecedented attack. As the last of the darkness faded, Ethan collapsed beside the pedestal, his body and mind pushed beyond their limits. The cube continued to glow, but more gently now, its purpose fulfilled. "It is done," the archive announced, its voice filled with something like awe. "The Empire returns, and the void retreats. The prophecy is fulfilled, though in a way none could have foreseen." Ethan tried to respond, but found he couldn't speak. His consciousness was fading, the strain of channeling such vast energies too much for his partly human physiology. "Rest now, last heir," the archive said softly. "You have earned it." As darkness of a different kind, the simple darkness of unconsciousness, claimed him, Ethan's final thought was not of empires or prophecies or cosmic entities. It was of Kayla, of her final words to him. What was between us, that was real. He hoped. Wherever she was, she knew he had not wasted her sacrifice. When Ethan awoke, he was no longer in the Nexus chamber. Instead, he found himself in a room that seemed to blend Xylanthian and human design elements. The living crystal walls now interspersed with more familiar materials, the alien angles softened to accommodate human perception. He was lying on something like a bed, though it contoured to his body in a way that suggested advanced technology. A large window revealed a breathtaking vista, a city of crystal spires against a lavender sky, exactly as he had seen in the archive's vision, yet subtly different, adapted somehow. "The patient awakens," came a familiar voice. Ethan turned his head to see Dr. Saren approaching his bedside, very much alive and seemingly uninjured. "You're dead," Ethan said bluntly, his voice hoarse from disuse. "I saw you die." Dr. Saren's expression held something like amusement. "What you saw was my physical form on Helios 7 terminate. But Xylanthian technology has long since overcome such limitations." She gestured to herself. "This is a new physical vessel, grown from my stored genetic template. My consciousness was transferred the moment before termination, a standard precaution for Preservation Society operatives." Ethan struggled to sit up, his body feeling strangely light, yet powerful. "How long was I unconscious?" 17 days, by human reckoning, Dr. Saren replied, checking something on a tablet similar to the one she had used during his paternity test, which now seemed a lifetime ago. "Your physiology underwent significant changes during the restoration process. Your dormant Xylanthian genetics have fully expressed themselves, integrating with your human DNA in a way our scientists are still studying with great interest." Ethan looked down at his hands, noticing for the first time the subtle metallic sheen to his skin, similar to what he had seen on Chief Tavros, but less pronounced, a blend of human and Xylanthian characteristics. "And the Empire?" he asked. "Did it work? Are they all back?" Dr. Saren's expression softened. "See for yourself." She gestured toward the window. "This is Xylanthus, the throne world, restored and adapting to its new place in the galaxy, 5 millennia after its disappearance." Ethan moved carefully to the window, still adjusting to his altered body. The city before him pulsed with life and activity, the spires he had seen in the vision now interspersed with structures of more diverse design, as if the restored civilization was already incorporating elements from the intervening millennia. "And the void?" he asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Retreated, for now," came another familiar voice from the doorway. "Your modification to the restoration sequence did more damage than we thought possible. They're not destroyed. Entities like that probably can't be truly destroyed, but they've withdrawn to lick their wounds, so to speak." Ethan turned to see Kayla standing there, alive and whole, dressed in a uniform that blended the midnight blue of the Preservation Society with the pearl white and gold trim of what he now recognized as Imperial styling. "Kayla," he breathed, relief washing over him. "You're alive too." She smiled, walking into the room. Same explanation as the good doctor. Consciousness transfer at the moment of physical termination. Though I must say, the new body takes some getting used to. Everything feels just slightly off, like wearing someone else's clothes. Ethan laughed, the sound surprising him with its ease. "I know the feeling." Dr. Saren discreetly excused herself, leaving them alone. Kayla approached until she stood beside Ethan at the window, both of them looking out at the restored city. "So," Ethan said after a comfortable silence, "what happens now? The prophecy is fulfilled. The Empire is back. Do I go back to fixing maintenance systems on space stations?" Kayla gave him a sidelong glance. "That depends entirely on you. Technically, as the last direct descendant of Emperor Talix, you have a claim to the Imperial throne. The High Council has been revived, and they're eager to meet with you." "Me, an emperor?" Ethan shook his head. "I don't think so. I'm half human, raised on Earth with no knowledge of Xylanthian traditions or politics. They can't seriously want me to rule." "Actually," Kayla replied, "many see your human heritage as an advantage. Your solution to the void threat proved that. 5,000 years of Xylanthian thinking couldn't solve the problem. It took a human perspective, your perspective, to find a new approach." She turned to face him directly. "The Empire needs to adapt to a galaxy that's moved on without it. The restoration isn't just about bringing back what was lost. It's about creating something new, a civilization that combines the best of what the Xylanthians were with all that's developed since. Who better to guide that process than someone who embodies that very combination?" Ethan considered her words, looking out at the city again. The idea was terrifying, overwhelming, and yet strangely appealing. Not for the power or status, but for the potential to build connections, to create harmony in a galaxy that had known too much conflict. "And what about us?" he asked quietly, turning back to Kayla. "Was it all just the mission? Now that the prophecy is fulfilled, do we go our separate ways?" Kayla's professional composure slipped, vulnerability showing in her eyes. "I meant what I said in the antechamber, Ethan. What was between us was real, complicated by duty and secrets, yes, but real nonetheless." She hesitated. "What happens next between us is up to you. I've completed my mission, but I find I'm not ready for it to end." Ethan reached out, taking her hand. It felt right, despite everything that had happened, despite the changes to both of them. "Neither am I." Before Kayla could respond, a chime sounded, and the door to the room opened once more. First Counselor Alara entered, her shifting color skin and galaxy-filled eyes even more impressive in person than they had been in the chamber beneath the Preservation Society headquarters. "Forgive the interruption," she said, her melodious voice carrying that same undercurrent of ancient wisdom. "But the High Council awaits, and there are matters of great importance to discuss." Ethan nodded, not releasing Kayla's hand. "I'm ready." As they followed Alara through corridors of living crystal and metal alloys, Ethan absorbed the sights of the restored throne world. Everywhere, Xylanthians moved with purpose, their civilization resuming after what was, to them, merely a momentary pause. Many stopped to bow respectfully as he passed, word of his identity having clearly spread. They entered a vast chamber that Ethan recognized from the archive's vision, the High Council chamber, though now with subtle modifications reflecting the passage of time. Around an enormous circular table sat representatives of the core worlds, a diversity of appearance reflecting the Empire's vast reach. At the head of the table stood an empty chair, more throne than chair really, crafted from living crystal that seemed to pulse with inner light. The Imperial seat, Ethan realized, intended for him. The High Council acknowledges Ethan Cole, last heir of the royal line, savior of the Empire, announced Alara formally. The prophecy is fulfilled. The sleeping Empire awakens. The void trembles. The assembled counselors rose as one, bowing deeply. "Please sit," Ethan said, uncomfortable with the deference. "We have much to discuss." As the council took their seats, Ethan remained standing, Kayla at his side. The throne-like chair at the head of the table waited expectantly, but he made no move toward it. "I understand the traditions and expectations," he began, looking around at the assembled faces. "But I am not Emperor Talix. I am not even fully Xylanthian. I was raised human, on Earth, with human values and human limitations. I cannot simply step into a role I was never prepared for." Murmurs of concern rippled through the council, but Ethan raised a hand for silence. "However," he continued, I recognize the unique position I occupy, a bridge between the ancient empire and the modern galaxy. The Zalanthian civilization was built on connection, on harmony between diverse worlds and peoples. That principle remains valid, perhaps more so now than ever before. He gestured toward the massive window overlooking the city. Out there is a galaxy that has continued for 5 millennia without the Empire. New civilizations have risen, new alliances formed. We cannot simply return and expect to reclaim what once was. Instead, we must build something new, a civilization that honors Zalanthian traditions while embracing change and diversity. Ethan paused, gathering his thoughts. The counselors watched intently, some with approval, others with reservation. Therefore, I propose a transitional period, a time for the Empire to reintegrate into the galactic community gradually, establishing diplomatic relations rather than asserting dominance. During this period, governance should be shared between the High Council and representatives from major galactic powers. "And your role in this arrangement?" asked Alara, her expression unreadable. Ethan glanced at Kayla, who nodded encouragingly. "I will serve not as Emperor, but as First Consul, a guide and mediator between the restored Empire and the wider galaxy. When the transition is complete, when true harmony is established, the people can decide the final form of governance." The chamber fell silent as the counselors considered his words. Finally, an elderly Zalanthian with silvery skin spoke up. "The heir speaks wisdom beyond his years," he said slowly. "Perhaps this is why the prophecy specified the last heir, not merely for the blood he carries, but for the perspective he brings. I support the proposal." One by one, the other counselors voiced their agreement, some enthusiastically, others with more reservation. Alara was the last to speak. "It is decided then," she declared. "Ethan Cole shall serve as First Consul of the restored harmony. Let preparations begin immediately for diplomatic outreach to the major powers of the modern galaxy." As the meeting adjourned, Ethan and Kayla found themselves alone in the chamber, standing before the imperial throne that would remain empty, for now, at least. "First Consul Cole," Kayla said with a small smile. "Has a nice ring to it." Ethan shook his head, still processing the magnitude of what he had set in motion. "This isn't at all how I expected my life to go when I showed up for what I thought was a simple paternity test." "Life rarely follows our expectations," Kayla replied, her expression turning more serious. "But sometimes the unexpected paths lead to the greatest destinations." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, seeing beyond the professional exterior to the woman he had fallen for, the woman who had died for him, the woman who now stood beside him at the dawn of a new era. "I'm glad you're here with me," he said simply. "Whatever comes next." Kayla's smile widened. "I wouldn't be anywhere else, First Consul." Together, they turned and walked from the chamber, leaving the empty throne behind, a symbol of what had been and what might someday be again, but not what was needed now. Now was the time for building bridges, for healing ancient wounds, for creating new connections. And as they stepped out onto a balcony overlooking the reborn city, the first diplomatic vessel from Earth appeared in the lavender sky above, humanity reaching out to its distant cousins, the first of many connections in a new web of harmony that would span the stars. Ethan Cole, maintenance worker turned First Consul, descendant of emperors yet raised among ordinary people, stood at the crossroads of past and future, ready to guide two civilizations toward a shared destiny. The DNA test that had begun as a simple question of paternity had revealed not just his heritage, but his purpose, to be not the last of an ancient line, but the first of something entirely new. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.